Hey viewers, my name's Cara. I hope you've all been well. I know this video is not being put up exactly when it should have been. Again, it's a little bit late. I've been doing a bunch of stuff and just kind of trying to keep things together, so better late than never, right? So this is something that I've been thinking of doing a video about for a couple of weeks now, since I had a phone conversation about this subject with one of my pagan friends who is on a very different pagan path from me. You know, it's still considered in the realm of paganism, of course, but we all believe so many different things. So we were just kind of chatting, and various different topics about practicing magic and the way that we do things came up, and this friend and I see things rather differently on a lot of subjects, and one of the things that we ended up talking about was the concept of a magic circle and casting circle when you do magic. And this is something that my views of have changed on over the years. I know that I did a video about magic circles in Wicca when I was just starting on YouTube. It's a very old, cringy video, and I honestly don't remember what I said in it because it was so long ago, and I'm sure that I had a different perspective on things then than I do now. So what I want to do in this video is just kind of recount the basic things that we talked about, the basic points that I have that I know about different things related to it, just to kind of start a discussion, because again, I don't think this is the kind of thing that I thought about it then, so this might just be new information, new food for thought for some of you, so just something to think about. So, the thing is, with a magic circle, that a lot of people, I think, from what I've observed over the years and talking to different people who are on different paths, I think that a lot of people think of magic circles in a certain way, right? We've been told that they have a specific purpose, and it seems like that is the way everyone uses them all of the time, but that is not true. So the thing that a lot of people think of when we think of magic circles, and this is the opinion that my friend holds about them, and that a lot of people that I've spoken to over the years have about them, is this. It's the idea that we kind of get from beginner books about witchcraft and Wicca, specifically kind of based things, because Wicca is definitely a path that utilizes casting magic circles. And the idea of that is to create sacred space. So this is, I think, one of the first things that many people think about when we think of casting the circle. We've read, or we've been taught, or we've heard that it's about creating a sacred space. And in that case, this is generally what we say about it, okay? I'm just going to walk you through it as though this is the thing that we're learning and this is what it is. So it tends to be described as creating a sacred space where you are creating a boundary between your space that you're about to work in and whatever is outside that space. And it is thought of as a circle of protection for keeping you safe in what you're doing and keeping any negative influences out. Some people think of that as like, ooh, there might be some negative entities being brought up that I don't want to let in here. That's not necessarily what it is. When we're talking about this, it means anything from your regular everyday life that you don't want to come into that space and mess you up. The reason that I think this is so prevalent in beginner books is because a lot of the time today we are self-taught. We are not all being raised in pagan families that do magic and cast circle. So I think a lot of the use in that context is so that, for example, when I was first starting, I did tell my mom about things pretty early on and it was fine, but a lot of you are in situations where that's not possible, and maybe you have no ability to practice in your own home because you don't feel comfortable doing that. Maybe you wait until you go away to school if you are someone who goes to college or university and lives there, and then you don't know what your roommate's going to think about it, you know, so there are these kinds of situations that we might be in where the surrounding environment is not conducive to what we're doing. So in that case, we might be casting a circle of protection, and it's to protect ourselves and our mental space and our work from the ideas and the negativity and the negative thinking about what we're doing of the people who are outside that circle. So it might be like your family, it might be like your roommate, it might be the people in the next room down the hall, whatever it is. That's how I see that. So we talk about it as creating your own sacred space and saying, this is your space, this is your safe space, this is where you can be who you are, this is where you can do your work. So that's really where I think that kind of thing came from. Now, yes, of course, there are, in some practices and in some paths, there are reasons that we cast circles of protection for containing certain things or for keeping certain entities out. Yes. But I think that what we're talking about a lot of the time when we read the beginner books, that's really what it's getting at, is it's encouraging you to create a safe space for yourself mentally, where you can feel like, okay, in this circle that I've created, it's my rules, this is what I believe and this is what I'm gonna do, and you don't worry about the rest of the world. Now, one of the biggest arguments against the whole sacred space thing is, for people who believe that the entire earth is sacred, what's the point in making a sacred space? Why would you sit there and cast a circle around yourself and say, this is sacred space, implying that the rest of the space that you were just in is somehow not sacred? That seems silly if you're someone who is, for example, an animist who believes that there is a soul and a spirit in everything. If you believe that everything in the world is sacred, why the heck would you create a circle and say, now that's sacred space? Well, that's why I've explained the previous thing. So I think what we're really saying there is, when you are in an area where something feels hostile to what you're doing, it helps to create your own protective space. But I absolutely am someone who believes that everything is sacred, and so now that I'm comfortable in my practice, I have my own space, I have my own home, there's no one here telling me that I can't do what I need to do, and even when I was living with my mother, she's very accepting of what I was doing. So there didn't feel so much a need to create a protective barrier. So I didn't always cast a circle. It didn't seem necessary to me. When I was working at college, if I had my room to myself, my room is my space. The walls of that room were my border and my space, and I felt safe there. So I didn't have to cast a circle within that space just to feel safe and to feel focused. I already had that. But not everybody has the ability to feel that way. But I do think that now that I'm in this place in my life, you know, and I have a lot of friends who have very similar beliefs, we could go into the park, in the middle of the woods, whatever, and we could do a thing, and we don't need to cast a circle, because we're in sacred space together. Just being in that community, that is sacred space, you know? So there's not always a need to create this boundary. Now, all that being said, one of the specific things that I have heard through my time in YouTube is I have had a couple different druids, specifically not Danny, my friend from Pagan Perspective. I have not actually spoken with her about this, so maybe I will. Maybe this will open that conversation for us. But Rob, when he used to be on the Pagan Perspective channel, talked to me about this, and also just some random druid person over time through YouTube sent me a message about this at one point, and I distinctly remember that he was also druid. And their point was this whole, druids believe that the whole world is sacred, nature is sacred, we prefer to do our rituals outside, so we don't see a point in creating sacred space because everything is sacred. And I totally agree with that. That tends to be something that they disagree with about Wicca. However, now that I have gone to some local druid rites around here in the Cleveland area, there is a druid group that does public rites, and they have done public ritual at Cleveland Pagan Pride a few times, things like that. So now that I've been to several, I can tell you that they don't cast a circle like Wiccans do, or like other types of witches do, because Wiccans are not the only ones who do cast a circle, by the way, if you didn't know that. They don't cast a circle as such, but they do something, at least this group does, something where they open and close the gates. And it's not a circle, it's literally just, it's usually delineated by a hand gesture of when they've started ritual and they've called the gods and now the gods are here, they say the gates are now open, and then we do the work, and then at the end we thank the gods, we let them go home, and then they say the gates are closed. So they're not casting a circle and taking up a circle, but that action of opening and closing the gates provides the same kind of mental work. It's saying, okay, we're doing something now, and now we are done. Which is kind of the same function for a lot of witches as I am casting the circle. It's like when you are forming your circle, it's like opening the gates. And when you close your circle and take it down at the end or put it away or whatever you do, different people do different things, that's equivalent to closing the gates. So that is what I've observed through my experiences going to public druid stuff. Again, maybe Danny and I can talk even more about this in depth and learn even more. So that'd be cool. And then the final point that I brought up to my friend when we were talking about this on the phone is that I have been getting more and more involved in the reclaiming tradition of witchcraft, which started in California. And I went to a witch camp, oh my gosh, what was it, almost going on 2 years ago now? Yeah, it'll be 2 years this fall. And in the reclaiming tradition, we do cast circle, but it has a different function. And this is the thing that makes the most sense to me, because like I said, now that I have my life the way that it is, I don't need to cast a circle to create a protective space or to delineate that, okay, I am safe doing what I'm doing here because other people in my household or wherever would not be accepting. I don't have to do that anymore. So this thing that reclaiming does is really the thing that makes sense to me, and when I do choose to cast a circle, This is why. So let me tell you. So when we cast a circle in reclaiming, well, I'd say two things actually, now that I'm thinking about it. One reason that we do it and one way that we do it is the same function as opening and closing the gates in a druid ceremony. It's saying we are in sacred space now, and now we are done. And something that I've been learning through the groups that I've been working with is that they actually will not close the circle or collapse the circle, or uncast it, I guess you could say, if we're just taking a break. We'll cast a circle to begin what we're doing throughout the morning. We do all of our work there, and then say, for example, we're going to go take a break to have a meal, and then we're going to come back and start workshop again later. At the end of the workshop, before we take a break, we will gather the circle and store it in something, and then it's still there. It hasn't been taken down, it's just kind of out of the way, it's put away because we're saying we're not doing that super sacred work right now. We're going to go have lunch and be in community, and of course that's all still sacred, but we're not doing specific work right now. So we just put it away, we go have our meal, whatever, and then when we come back, we pull the circle back out of wherever we have stored it, and boom, there it is again. And then when we're totally done for the entire weekend, the entire week, whatever it is, then we uncast it, close it, let it dissolve and go away, because then its work is done. So it's a very different thing, and I love it. This is part of the reason that reclaiming feels so good to me, is that these things make a lot of sense for me, and they feel really good. So that's one way that we use circles in reclaiming. The other way is that we use them as a container, and this is the biggest one. So the easiest way I have to describe this is, for all of my fellow freeze babies out there, is by talking about heating a space. So let's take my whole apartment, for example, or pretend you live in an enormous house, or maybe you do live in an enormous house, and good for you. So let's think about a really enormous house, and let's say for some reason it does not have central heating and air. So we're going to try to heat the whole house using a little space heater. And you put that space heater in your entryway, or in your foyer, or in your living room, wherever. Kind of a central space. And you turn it on, and you wait. And you wait for the heat to fill up the whole house. How long is that going to take? A while, because it keeps dispersing to fill the entire space. And if the space is really big, you know, let's say you've got all the different doors open because you want the entire house to be heated by just this one little thing, it's going to take a while. Now if you close the doors to that room, the room will heat up much faster than the entire house, because you're containing that heat just within that room. You've closed the doors, so you've created a boundary, so the heat rises to fill that space. Maybe it only takes an hour to fill that room that you're in. You want to know what happens even faster? Is if you grab a blanket, put it over your legs, and put the other end of the blanket over the space heater. Then you warm up really, really quickly, because you're only warming up a tiny little space. If you don't like the heat metaphor, you can also think of filling a container with water. If I take a pitcher of water and I pour it out onto the sidewalk, it's going to keep running and running and running because there are no boundaries keeping it in place. So if I was trying to fill that space with water, it would take a long time and I would just keep pouring. But if I get a container, a bowl, a cup, a vase, whatever, and I want to fill that with water, it works a lot better because I've created a boundary. I'm holding in that liquid. Liquid takes the shape of whatever it is in. Energy, or heat, does the same thing. So if me and my friends go out into the park, in the middle of the woods, whatever, and we want to raise energy, we can raise energy to our heart's content and just let it go, and let it go out into the world, and it'll be great. But how are we going to know when we're done? How are we going to know how much we've raised? How are we going to know how much we feel? We're just going to go until we're exhausted, basically, because it's just going to keep going. But if we cast a circle first, even though we're out in the woods, and that's all sacred and good, we're not casting that circle with the intent of creating a sacred space, not sacred space boundary. There are all kinds of different ways that you can cast circle. They can be permeable, they can be reflective, they can be a whole lot of things. But if we cast a circle out there in the woods and we raise our energy, and we do our drumming and our dancing and whatever, we can feel that energy start to build up because it's being contained within the space around us. Then, when we know that we've filled it up to the brim and it's ready to burst, then we can pop that bubble and shoot it off to wherever it is that we wanted that energy to go. You can direct it to a specific thing. This is also the cone of power. That's what that is about, is directing it to a specific place. But if you haven't contained the energy, there's no way to bring it all together in one cohesive whole, build it up to an amount that you want, and then send it off. it's just going to keep flowing like that water out of that pitcher, or it's just going to keep going like that heat filling up that entire house with all the doors open. So that is the #1 reason that I use circles in my practice currently, is as a container for energy. What do you use circles for in your practice, if anything at all? And if you don't use circles, do you do something else to kind of begin and end your space, or your time that you are setting aside for something? One idea that just came to my mind is that sometimes when I'm just sitting down to meditate, I like to use my singing bowl to ring in the beginning of my meditation time, and then when I am done, I ring it out. Some people, you might like to light a candle when you're getting ready to sit down to do devotionals or say some prayers, and then when you're done, you extinguish the candle. When you prepare to start reading a book, when you begin to read a book, you open it up to the first page. When you've read a little bit and you need to take a break, you put in your bookmark, you close the book. There are still things that we do to say, I am beginning something right now, and now I am ending something. And there might be something you do when you say, I'm not done with this yet, but I'm putting it away for a little while and I'll be back to it. So what are all those things that you do? Do you have things? Have you thought of this before? If you haven't, and you might like to incorporate these things, what are some things that you personally could do? If a circle's not your thing, what could you do that might help you feel a little bit more purposeful in what you're doing? So that's my new and updated 2017 discussion on the purpose of circles in Magic. And I don't mean the card game. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you for sharing your ideas and input about your paths in the comments. I will see you next time. Until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.